do the introductions. So welcome all to Avanti Women's webinar, June 28th, today, glorious day, strengthening your personal resilience. And this is presented by our guest speaker, Terri, one of the managing partners of Magus. Am I saying that correctly, Terri? Magus?
Magus, close.
Magus, I was close.
It trips everyone up.
We're really pleased to offer this, and when we sent out the webinar invitation, there was a lot of interest, and I was telling Terri as we were preparing for this that it seems that many people are interested in resilience, and the great thing is you will really understand once Terri goes through this what resilience actually means and how you can develop that. So it's an incredible webinar. So with no further ado, we'll move on to the next. There we go. So in this webinar, and I think this is what attracted people, is you'll understand the 7 characteristics required to strengthen your personal resilience. And as you see, it's a key factor in promoting your own personal health and well-being by increased emotional regulation and personal equilibrium. And that was something that was very interesting to me as we went through this session, and how it really contributes to our health and reduced stress and our performance. So that's what Terri hopes to cover in this short session. Again, it certainly is not a full-length course, but she will definitely give you some great information. My name is Susie Love, and I am the learning resource for Avanti Women. And we run a free webinar series every month. And this month, we decided to focus on wellness and health. And we're pleased to offer this webinar presented by Terri, who's the expert on strengthening your personal resilience. For people who are not familiar with Avanti Women, we are a GTA and beyond based organization led and run by volunteers, and all about empowering women to develop themselves personally and professionally. We provide learning, networking, and mentoring. We did have a wellness expo scheduled for mid-July, and that's how we were introduced to Terri who was doing a presentation at our wellness expo, but unfortunately we've had to postpone that to September. So I encourage people to continue to follow up on the Avanti Women website to get additional details about the wellness expo and when it will be happening in September. Just a quick introduction about our guest speaker, and here I will, Terri has over 20 years experience as organizational development professional, all kinds of different industries from financial services, retail, not-for-profit, and different professional services, a keynote speaker and consultant, and different strategies. And I think that resilience is one of the topics that she does present as part of her consultant business. And her passion is helping individuals and organizations to increase their well-being. And resilience is really one of the critical pieces to help you increase your well-being. So Terri, if I can turn it over to you, and I will ask you to just give the audience a little bit more detail about yourself.
Sure, thanks, Susie.
And you should have control.
And hello, everyone. Thank you very much. Okay. Alrighty. Thanks very much for joining us. I'm just going to make sure that I do. The last time it had a little bit of a lag, and we seem to be having a bit of a lag again. Okay. It took a few minutes for it to cross over, so I'll talk for a second, and then I'll see whether I can get those controls or not. So a little bit more, thanks for the great introduction, Susie. A little bit more information. So I'm a managing partner at Magus, as Susie mentioned, and we do specialize in resilience. I am a change management practitioner by trade, and what I've found is resilience is a very key part of any kind of change. We're going to talk a little bit today about how change or disruption or stress or whatever all sort of has the same impact on us, and there is a way for us to actually lessen that impact, and that is through strengthening our resilience. I still can't get it to advance, Susie.
I think that unfortunately
How
here,
do we do that?
there, I'll just send it to the next one. You might just need to tell me then. There, do you see the next screen?
Yes. Yeah, I have. Yeah, I can see it, but for whatever reason, I can't seem to change it. But anyway, so we are going to look at mindful resilience today, which resilience is all about how we show up to change. It's about our emotional response to change, and mindfulness is just one of the approaches that we can use in order to strengthen our resilience. And in my experience, it is probably the best, and that is because of the very strong connection to how our brain is actually working when we are disrupted or in stress or whatever. So we're going to talk about two very big topics today, and I'll put the caveat in there that, as Susie mentioned off the top, that this is by no means a full program, and even to look at a half-day program gives you a really good base and a place to start. But my experience and my recommendation is that this is it's more of a lifelong pursuit. This is something that we need to continue to amass information and understanding about. This it's pretty big, and we're also talking about trying to make fairly significant either behavioral or mindset changes in ourselves to help us look at change and disruption differently. So all that, but you'll still get some really good stuff out of today that will help you to move on. It is a passion of mine, and it's a journey that I have been on for a number of years. It started again way back when I first did my certification in change management and went out into my various client sites and put these amazing change management strategies together with the communication and the training and everything else like that, and continue to watch how some people just got with it, moved on, absorbed the change, embraced the change, whatever, and others so struggled and really had a very, very difficult time. And it was very painful to watch. And I said, I thought there's got to be a better mousetrap here. And what I realized, the difference between those people who embrace change and really look forward to it and find opportunity within it. So those who not only just survive, but thrive through it, versus those who really struggle with it, was really their emotional response to it. And all the change management strategies in the world don't help you deal with that emotional response. And so that's where I really started looking into resilience and getting an understanding of how that helps us have a different emotional response. And I think the message that I have for you today is that we do have control over our emotional response. We don't have to be the victims of our emotions or the victims of the circumstances around us. We can choose to look at it differently. And so that's definitely one of the underlying messages that I have for you today. The benefits of resilience. Susie, can you move me forward? I really don't know why we can't. We practiced this and it still didn't work. So I'm not too sure why I can't do it. But anyway, I'll let go of that. So the benefits of resilience. So why do we want to be resilient? We want to cope effectively with stress and uncertainty and bounce back, absorb those high levels of change, adjust to disruption, and maintain high levels of productivity. Yes, it's all possible. And I think if you thought about some people that are in your lives, you could probably add a few more attributes to that. And I think we're going to have a little bit of an opportunity to do that later on. But just to think about why do we want to look at resilience, and this is certainly to be able to do all of this in the midst of change, disruption, stress, and I'll use all of those words interchangeably. This helps us to not end up going down the rabbit hole, as I call it. So we're going to start right off the top with two exercises. One of them is a mindfulness exercise, and the next one is more of a change exercise. So we're going to start with the mindfulness one, and we're going to set an intention. And so what this does, and this is something you can do for everything. So this is on the next slide. We don't have instructions, but setting the intention is something that you can do anywhere. You can set an intention when you're going into a meeting. You can set an intention when you are sitting down for dinner with your family. Whatever it is, This is an easy mindfulness exercise that gets you into the space, because mindfulness is all about being present. It's about being in the moment. It's about letting go of the past and not worrying about the future, and just being here in the now. And so what I'd like all of you to do is, when you think about the next 45 minutes or so that we'll be together, what I'd like you to do is, I'd like you to set an intention. What do you want to do for the next 45 minutes? Do you want to be here with an open mind? Do you want to be here and actively participating? Do you want to be listening intently? What is your intention for the next 45 minutes? So I'll just pause for a second and give you a moment to think about that, and possibly even to think about where else you can apply it in your life. And then we'll carry on.
Oh, Terri, I think you've gone ahead there. Here we go.
Yeah, I have. So I have control, but it's very delayed. So it's okay. Okay, yeah. So it's a little tricky. Okay, so I don't know if anyone is comfortable sharing their intentions, but I would love to hear from someone using the chat, if they would like to share what their intention would be for the next 45 minutes, or even a place that you would use this exercise. I know for myself, when you're going back-to-back meetings throughout the day, sometimes it helps to be able to take that breath before you move from one meeting to the next, and sort of regroup and recenter. So that certainly is an idea. But if anyone has any ideas how they could use it, or what their intention was, be great, because I'd like this to be as interactive as possible. It's would be much more beneficial for all to if we can benefit from each other's observations and insights.
Dina sent a message, and she wanted to say that her intention is to keep an open mind and learn something. That's her intention. And we have another person saying to get inspired and learn something practical. And I believe in that. Learning something practical to try is an amazing intention. My intention is I need to sit in the moment and absorb the information, and instead of moving on to next task. Someone else has said that their intention is to listen and learn about resilience.
Yeah, great. That's fabulous. Great. Thank you so much for that. And if any of you are yoga practitioners out there, you might be very familiar with that activity. And so you're also familiar with how difficult it can be. So we have the greatest intentions, and sometimes we forget what those are. So a large part of strengthening resilience and mindfulness is actually starting to be very much aware of the self-talk that goes on in our minds, and very much, again, about where we are from one moment to the next. And increasing that awareness is both difficult, because we're not programmed that way, but also very valuable to be able to do. So this is sort of the first start on that. So our next exercise, this is now to get you thinking about your response to change, disruption, stress. And what I'd like you to do is take a look at the various pictures that you see on this slide, and don't overthink it, but think of a recent, again, disruption, stress, or change that you had to undergo, and go with your gut reaction. What picture best represents how you felt about whatever the scenario was that came to mind for you? And then we'll talk a little bit about what some of these pictures might possibly represent. So again, I'll just pause for a couple of seconds and let you think of the scenario, and then choose your picture.
And I'm going to jump in because I've had the opportunity to look at this. And this is, my boss is on the line, but I'm still going to say my gut reaction is I'm picking the picture with the lady with the pink turtleneck with her fingers in her ears, my response to change. And I'm not necessarily proud of that, but that's my gut reaction. Where I want to move to is kind of on the left-hand side in the bottom corner, someone flying through the air with a kite who looks quite happy and joyful and has movement about change. So I've shared what my starting
Mhm.
position is and where I want to go to out of these pictures. Is there anybody else that sees
That's
any of
great,
these
Susie.
pictures? I think everybody's feeling quite shy.
That's understandable. Sometimes we need a little time to think about something like this as well. And I think we were also, and so Susie, you were very candid with saying that, you know, it's that top picture, the woman with her fingers in her ears, and so perhaps expressing a little bit of an avoidance of something new and maybe being more comfortable with the status quo. And you are not alone at all. I mean, we are actually quite programmed to avoid change. Um, okay, there we go. Our brain in particular is not programmed to be resilient. We are programmed to like the status quo. And so we're going to look at today, we're going to look at a methodology, is not the right word, we're going to look at characteristics that would say when we are resilient, we would embrace change, we would stay connected, we would keep open-minded, we would keep all of those great things going for us. And yet so often what happens is that we do the opposite. We hunker down, we want to close the doors and shut the blinds, and we become very narrow or black and white in our thinking, and a little, you know, obstinate about, you know, it ain't broke, so don't fix it. If we're talking about change, perhaps we get disconnected from the people that we would usually be connected with. So we do that, again, because we have a very protective mechanism that helps us to keep homeostasis. And homeostasis, as you can see from this slide, is that natural movement of any organism towards equilibrium and away from change. That is our key operating principle.
Yeah,
So if you think from a physio, sorry, Susie, go ahead.
yeah, I was going to say there's a couple pieces of feedback is that you know, when the world's on your back, Dina says that the world feels like she's got the world on her back, but she wants the kite. She liked the kite picture, so she wants the joy. Someone else has said it depends whether they're initiating the change versus being the recipient of the change. And I also wanted to, when you said
Absolutely.
our brains not programmed for change. Sometimes I look at my kids, and they, I always wonder if you're younger, change doesn't, you know, some kids are like, sure, let's try that, let's move on. So I wonder if it's whether it's a personality or whether it's an age thing. So, you know, I think it depends on a lot of different factors.
Oh, it does. And thank you for raising that, Susie, because again, we're talking about big topics, and we're just going, you know, we're skirting over the surface of them, especially when it comes to the brain. I mean, it's very complex. So we're going to talk about some big concepts, and, you know, and hopefully get a better understanding of maybe why we have the reactions that we have. But this is by no means a brain science course. Um, so yes, so thank you for pointing that out. And, you know, it's quite interesting what you said about kids, because I often get the opposite. I will say, have a lot of people, or had a lot of people over the years come to me and say, you know, don't we get better with change as we get older? Because we, you know, we have more confidence, or we know we've done it before, so we know we can do it again. So it's interesting that you mentioned your kids and the opposite. So kids are I think are naturally more resilient because they don't know any better.
Better.
It's my 2 cents on that. But yes, so the homeostasis is, you know, from a physiological perspective, think about what our bodies are doing moment by moment to keep that status quo. So it's regulating our temperature, our blood pressure, our heart rate, all that kind of good stuff. That's homeostasis. And our body is constantly looking and making adjustments to keep us, because it's a survival mechanism. And our brains are no different. The survival mechanism there, and we know this because of all the great technology that's available now, that the same parts of our brain light up when with threat, a physical threat or a perceived threat. So that perceived threat could be your manager's angry with you, or you're having a a battle with someone in your family, that is perceived as threat. Okay, so it's the same part of your brain is lighting up. And so change or disruption, again, to use those words interchangeably, will light up that part of our brain, and our brain will then move into trying to stave off this threat. And so this is when we start, and I think that there's been so much talk about the limbic system and the amygdala over the last few years that I won't spend a whole lot of time on it, but that's exactly that part of our brain that gets connected. And that's the amygdala's job. The amygdala's job is to keep us safe, to the point that 5 times a second it is scanning and asking the question, is it safe? Is it safe? So it's always on the lookout for anything that might be a threat to us. The organizing principle of the brain is to move toward reward and to move away from threat. Again, that's another huge topic and has all kinds of implications. But for our purposes, it helps us to understand why maybe we don't respond to change so well. And actually, to go back to one of the participants' comments about depends whether I'm initiating it or whether it's being done to me, absolutely. But it also depends on the nature of whatever it might be as well. We don't have the same reaction to every type of change, or some change that we might welcome. So all kinds of shades of gray in this topic. So we are hyper vigilant to detect and act upon changes in our environment and then get back to the familiar as soon as possible. We know this from our brain studies. And we also know that our survival depends on our capacity to detect errors and changes. And so there's no surprise that that's why we can sometimes have the response that we have. So if we look at resilience, and a definition of resilience, which is coming up when the next slide decides to appear.
There we go.
There it is. Really, there's a huge delay on it. Resilience is all about being able to cope, and it's not about, I like to raise the bar on this. The definition of resilience can be somewhat uninspiring. To me, it's not just about surviving through whatever. It is about thriving through. And so when you think of someone who just always comes out the other side of whatever comes at them, not just surviving, but actually thriving, perhaps being in a better place than where they were when they started, what are some of the characteristics or attributes that you would assign to these folks? So again, take a second, and Susie, maybe again, because you've had a chance to think about this, maybe you could kick us off with someone you think who is highly resilient, and what characteristic or attribute you would assign to them.
Well, it's funny because it seems like positivity seems to be one of the things that if we can be positive, we could conquer the world. So positivity, I'm going to go with positivity.
Okay, yeah,
someone
and it
else
is definitely one of the characteristics which we're going to see.
There's some other things. Someone else who doesn't lose it or get angry, a humor and consistent behavior, strong. Dina says that teamwork we're both displaying is an example of resilience. So we have some feedback on different things. Strength, humor, consistent behavior are the characteristics.
Okay, yeah, no, those are great. And yes, humor is definitely up there as a strength. And I think, strength being something that we can draw upon from all kinds of different areas. So for this particular brand, I guess, of resilience, for lack of a better way of putting it, we have 7 characteristics that have, and this is from years of study, by the way, so let me just give you a little bit of a background on that. So these characteristics come out of an organization, Resilience Alliance, who this is their baby, and they have for the last 25 years done research, interviews, focus groups, all kinds of good stuff, which has basically validated that there are these 7 characteristics that highly resilient people possess. And if this was a in-person or a full program, you would have completed a questionnaire that would help you to understand where you sit in those characteristics. And the fact that we don't have that, I'm just going to speak to them and try and pull them up without trying to advance everything too far. So one of them is definitely positivity. Sorry, Susie, did you have a comment?
I think that the slide, we might want to just pull them all up because it's really a delayed reaction.
Yeah, I'm afraid I might have already moved us into the next one because I've lost count of how many times I've clicked. I should have had them pulled up in the first place. So positivity is one, and I'll go into a little bit of explanation on all of these. And this is where your handout comes in, by the way, folks. So the handout that Susie sent out yesterday, there's a bit of will help you to follow along, and just so I don't end up droning on for too long, because it's a lot to have to go through these 7 characteristics. Okay, and let's see if okay, hopefully it doesn't move forward. Okay, positivity, confidence, priorities, creativity, connection, structure, and experimenting. Okay, so hopefully you all have your handout. I'll go through each of these and talk high level on them. And as I'm doing that, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to sort of think about yourself, and it's always helpful to have a scenario in mind. So maybe, going back to the beginning with that, when you chose that, whatever picture resonated, maybe using that same scenario just for simplicity's sake. Also, as we're going through these characteristics, keep that picture in the back of your head too, because there should be an alignment to the picture that you chose and how you feel that you measure up, to use a term, I guess, not a great term, how you measure up to these characteristics. So positivity, let's start with positivity. And positivity is all about...
Sorry, Terri, I think we skipped past one. We went through to confidence.
I think we did.
Or
I think we did. Oh, you know what? I don't think we have positivity. Isn't that interesting? Okay, I'm just going to speak to... Oh, we don't, because I don't even have it on my version. So
we'll just stay here.
Included. Yeah, just stay here. So positivity, for me, positivity is always about, is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? It's the same glass. This is really, to me, it's always the best example of, we have a choice here. We can choose to look at it half empty. We can choose to look at it half full. And it really is a mindset that we have to adopt to see, okay, it is half full. And so when you think about change, disruption as well, it's 2 sides to the same coin. Yes, there is threat. I'll speak to my area of expertise being organizational change. Whenever organizational change is coming about, there's definitely threat, whether it's our status or our job or our confidence or whatever it might be. But there's also opportunity. And if we decide to focus on the threat, guess what? That's the path we go down. And when we get into some of the brain science, you'll see that that very much is the case. Where we put our attention is where we start creating those neural pathways and start strengthening those brain connections. We want to strengthen the brain connections into the very productive and positive parts of our brain, which is where the mindfulness piece comes in. So we have both sides, the threat, and there's always the opportunity as well. And it's how can we actually encourage ourselves? What can we do that will help us to remember there are 2 sides to this scenario? And there's all kinds of great activities. And one of my favorite ones is actually, it's a Stephen Covey, which is a circle of influence, which helps us to focus on what we can affect and what we can change, and also to see where there is the potential and the possibility. So that, if people are familiar with that activity, that would be a great example. So you'll see in the handout that you have, hopefully you do have that, there's the high and the low. And what I would ask you to do is just to say, you can put yourself this high, medium, and low, just circle whichever one you think would be appropriate for you when you think about when change happens, not day to day, not when things are going tickety-boo, but when things are challenging for you. Do you find yourself sliding into that negative space where you see the threat, and where you feel negative and where your energy gets drained. As a matter of fact, it's all connected. Or do you see the potential and the possibility in it? So again, just rate yourself high, medium, low on positivity. And then the next one is confidence, which we should have a slide for. And confidence is really our ability, but how we feel about our own ability to get through some of the challenges. You can see here that, you know, a low confidence would be, we prefer situations that first what we're comfortable with, it's requiring less effort. We might be a little less reticent, or a little more reticent, sorry, to take action. Versus if we are high, we are comfortable with our strengths and our weaknesses. So we know going into whatever this new, whatever it is, that we have strengths that we can apply, and we know where our downfall is too. So we know where we need to shore up. So again, if you could just indicate for yourself if you think you are high, medium, or low on confidence. And I think, you know, if we were to look at some ways that we could strengthen this characteristic, I think one of the best ways of doing this is to remember all that you have accomplished. You know, we probably, all of us are accomplished in our own careers or personal lives, and it's human nature that we forget that stuff while we focus on the negative stuff. So perhaps just to go through an exercise of recalling all the great things or the accomplishments that you have done throughout your life. So then the next one is priorities. And
I've moved it. Oops, sorry.
I have that. There it is. Okay, so you're moving it? Okay. Yeah. All right, so priorities. So this has a couple of different layers to it. Okay, so there's the big picture when you think about why we're here, and I do mean literally why are we here. What is your mission? What is your passion? And being able to keep that focus even when everything is moving and shifting, and perhaps the path is less clear because that path has now been moved or taken away completely. And it's also that day-to-day level. So how do we continue to keep putting one foot in front of the other and making and getting things accomplished, and feeling that sense of accomplishment as well as engagement. So it has two pieces to it. I personally think it's where we need to stay focused is on the big picture when we are in the midst of a bunch of change. And session I was facilitated probably a couple of months ago now. It was an IT team, and they were going through some huge structural changes. And one of the guys at the back put his hand up and he said, "You know, I know exactly what you're talking about." He said, "I deliver good customer service. That's what I do. The rest of this stuff is noise. Doesn't matter what all this noise is around me, all this disruption, all this transformation, all this change. I deliver good customer service. That's why I get out of bed in the morning." And I thought, brilliant. Like, that really summed up what this is all about. And we can lose that when we are feeling disrupted. And so how do we step back and remember that this is just noise, that this is just another, you know, drop in the bucket, and it too shall pass. That's priorities. Again, if you can rate yourself on how you think that you, in the midst of disruption, are able to keep that focus, are able to keep that, whether it's on the big picture or on the project at hand, whichever one resonates with you. It's different for all of us. And then we move on to the next one, which is creativity. And creativity is, this is our ability to stay open-minded, really, to a large degree. So in the low side of things, we're much more comfortable with familiar ways of thinking.
Terri,
We focus on the flaws and the suggestions. Yeah.
Someone asked something, I think, about priorities, and very interesting is, how do we manage expectations? We want to do one thing at a time when the world seems to be so enamored or multitask. We live in a world of multitasking. So that's something to remember when you're thinking about priorities as well, that there is pressure to do multitask.
Yes, there is, and that, yes, and that is absolutely the way of the world. So do we consider resilient? I guess I put back the question: when we look at the resilient people in our lives, do we consider them able to multitask, or is that different from resilience? And I would almost say that it is different. Are we able to multitask if we're more resilient? Perhaps. I think we're going to see one of the characteristics coming up that really speaks to that. And so if we possess the characteristic of structure, we might be able to multitask a little bit better than someone who doesn't have it.
And Terri, unfortunately, we're running a little short on time. So can I move us through to the next one, and people will just spend just a few moments on each one of these so that we can get to the mindfulness practices? So
absolutely, you're right. I just noticed the time as well. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so we can, as people can just rate themselves as they go through, and I'll talk very quickly on all of it. So again, structure is about staying organized and being able to access information and keep process and in mind as you're in the midst of chaos. Experimenting, how comfortable are you with taking risks without having all the information? That's probably the best way of thinking about experimenting. We miss connection, which is staying connected to people, being vulnerable, still trusting, being comfortable putting your hand up when you need help. Those are some of the different ways of looking at that. So yes, apologies for that. Having to go through that so quickly. So now what? So we have an understanding perhaps of those characteristics, which again have been determined to be the characteristics that highly resilient people possess. You now have hopefully had a chance to sort of see where maybe you have strengths in one and maybe you need to shore up a couple. And folks, that's how it usually works out. Ideally, we would like to have equal strength in all of them, but most of the profiles that come back would see people with mixed profiles, the strength in some areas and not so strong in other areas. Makes perfect sense. And so it's those areas typically that you're not so strong in, the characteristics that you're not so strong in, that you would look at strengthening. Now, this is where mindfulness comes in, and mindfulness, because of the impact it has on the brain. So the easiest way of thinking about this is mindfulness by virtue of staying in the present. It is strengthening the connections, those neural pathways, into the parts of our brain where all those great resilience characteristics reside, very simplistically. And again, I appreciate that it might be too simplistic for some of you out there if you've got a deeper knowledge, but for our purposes right today, that's the best way of thinking about it. So mindfulness, the very act of being present, creates those neural pathways into the part of our brain that hosts all these great characteristics. Some of the other things it does, and you see this on this slide, it helps us to regulate our emotional reactivity, which is exactly what we're talking about. It can reduce the size and impact of the amygdala. That can't go away. That is how we survive. That's how we stay alive. But the difference is we don't spend so much time in that disrupted state. We will always go into the disrupted state because the amygdala will act much faster than our thinking brain, but we don't need to linger there. We can bounce back into that thinking brain much faster by using mindfulness practices. So that's how it helps us. The next slide, Susie, I just spoke to that, so you can actually move through that. And we're back to that one. Oh, yeah. We're going backwards instead of forwards.
So you want me to, you don't want me to leave it on this
go forward
prefrontal cortex?
No.
Okay.
No, that's pretty much what I just spoke to. Those are the areas that it impacts. So again, let's try a little bit of an activity. I think we have time to do this. It won't take us very much time at all. It's about 30 seconds, and I think it's always a really good example because it seems so easy. And again, I don't want to scare people off, but this is making big changes that are not always that comfortable. So, okay, so how difficult can it be? Let's start with a couple of deep breaths in and out through your nose. Again, those of you who are yogis, you'll get that. Find something to focus on, the rise and fall of your chest, the air coming in and out of your nose, whatever it might be. And I'm going to sound a chime, and we're going to go for 30 seconds. And at that end of the 30 seconds, what you need to do during that period is do nothing but focus on whatever it is you chose to focus on and see how you do for, and we won't go 30 seconds, we'll just go for a brief period of time. So here comes the chime. And there's the end. So again, some of you, and love to hear from you, some of you may have found it very easy to stay focused on whatever it was that you chose to. Others may have found your mind racing off to what's happening at 1 o'clock or what's happening later on, or the long weekend perhaps. So I'm sure different experiences. So did people find it easy or more challenging? And love to hear from you. And please use the chat, and I'll continue to talk. We'll go on to the next slide now and look at some of the mindfulness practices that you can use to help strengthen these characteristics and your overall resilience. And so one of the easiest and probably most effective for those of us with busy lives is the STOP. And STOP is an acronym for, the S is stop, T is take a breath, O is observe, and by that you're observing what's going on in your head, you're observing your body. Are your shoulders up around your ears? Is your face clenched? If you're like me, you walk around with your face clenched all the time. Are your shoulders clenched? Whatever it might be, take another breath, make whatever adjustment you need to, and then the P is proceed. So again, that's something we can do anytime, anywhere, to get us into the present, to get our head into wherever it needs to be, whether it's dinner with the family or a meeting or a difficult conversation or whatever it is. Gratitude and meditate are probably the best all-encompassing. Gratitude and meditating is almost instantaneous impacts. I don't know if there's the connections are stronger or what it is, but I did find when I started practicing gratitude that I just saw immediate results of just being able to calm down, get into that thinking part of my brain, that rational part of my brain, and away from that limbic system. So it was very immediate. The walking and eating, again, how easy, and we don't do it. Your daily commute walk, or your walk to the office, or your walk to lunch or whatever, just start paying attention and being in the present moment. Again, just by being in the present moment, you're creating those strong connections. Compassion is another big one, both self-compassion as well as compassion for others. Very easy to do, almost instantaneous results. And you'll find your resilience strengthening almost immediately. So I had a bit of an activity afterwards, but I think,
Sorry, what was the body scan?
Ahead,
the body scan. So you just scan.
Oh, you breathe into every part of you. So start at on your left foot, on your toes, and just breathe into every part of you. Work your way up and work your way back down again. Again, it's forcing you to be present. It's forcing you to be noticing any twinges or pains or discomfort, or where you might be holding pressure, where you're not holding pressure. And it's a great way of getting out of bed in the morning, and it's a great way of going to sleep at night. So while you're just lying there, to start the day being that focused on you and in the present is an incredible and very easy exercise to do.
Great, thank you.
All right, so no worries. We'll skip over the next one, which was how we could apply these practices. Some of these practices will be all of these practices will help us strengthen our resilience. No doubt about it, again, because of that brain connection. Some of these practices might be better for some characteristics as opposed to others. And I think, so positivity, certainly compassion and gratitude, that's going to help you with your positivity big time. Let me skip down to something else. So the structure, which is that one's always a little bit of an oddball one, but the structure of the body scan, walking, eating, because you actually are applying some structure and some discipline, would help. And yeah, but otherwise, again, all of them will work. I think it's whatever resonates with you, whatever practice you can add into your day without it becoming another thing you're adding into your day. And then, and that sort of speaks to the next slide, really, which is that the journey continues. I said off the top, this is a big topic. And for me, my journey continues. I'm currently in the middle of a certification in positive psychology, which is just amazing in terms of how it's both affirms everything as well as giving me new stuff. And so I never stop reading. I never stop learning. It's a big topic, but the benefits are what motivate me, and I have seen huge impact on how I manage through change and disruption and some of the stresses, and that's good enough for me to keep on going.
Yeah.
So I'm going to stop there. There are resources and but I'm going to stop.
Yeah, and I think that
Sorry,
I'm actually going to go back to this slide. So we did send a strengthening personal resilience. We did send a handout, and one of the handouts was down the side the different techniques and then what you need to increase. So if you went back to the different characteristics and you saw where you might be a little bit low, then you could take a look at these. And I think I heard Terri say that this is not to increase positivity, you must use gratitude and compassion. They're more of recommendations, but to understand the tools on how you can improve your characteristics, I think from a practical standpoint, you can take a look at your analysis, and then you take a look at the chart that highlights the tools, and then put together, what you'd like to strengthen the most. And there was another question is from what other great resource? So someone said, thank you so much. Sorry, guys, I'm just going to look through the chat, and there are some resources that I will flip to, and I see some notes that they didn't get the handout, so I will email those. And I'm going to go on next. These are the resources that Terri is recommending. So someone had asked about some additional resources. So I think that if you investigate these, that would be if you're interested in continuing the journey, and it sounds like Terri's an expert and still considers herself on the journey of learning about these. So it's not your education's going to stop after you read one, that it's a continuation of self-improvement. And for the people on the call, I will email these out to you separately so that you can follow up. And also, Terri also left her contact information. So if you wanted to write down her contact information, she's open, I believe, Terri, to continuing the conversation, if I'm correct.
That's right. At Mages, we do one-on-one coaching, we do team facilitation, we do a general facilitation. So, yep, most definitely, but absolutely happy to answer any questions that people might have or to continue that conversation.
Great. So just as ending this up, thank you so much, Terri. Very interesting. I didn't always like the results that I found, but I'm encouraged that I do have some tools to improve, and that's that improvement's the key. And as follow up for everybody on the call, I will send out the resources. I will also go back through the list and send you out the handouts, because I think it's a really good exercise for you to go through. And in addition to the resources, I can send out Terri's contact information. And just a reminder as I close this off, that our Wellness Expo has been postponed, but I really encourage people to check back on Avanti Women website to see developments about the expo. This resilience topic was a really critical part of our Wellness Expo, and that's how we discovered Terri, and we're very grateful for that. And wanted to make sure that everybody continues to seek out the different resources that Avanti Women has. So I thank you very much for participating. I will send out those follow-up emails, and If you have any questions, you'll have my contact information. And this entire recording, if you wanted to review it as you're going through your exercises, will be available shortly on Avanti Women YouTube channel. So thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Terri. And I'm going to sign off now, and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the beautiful Canada Day long weekend.
Thank you so much, Susie. Thanks, everyone. Have a great long weekend.
Bye-bye.